And I think that's the beauty of collaboration and working with a composer and doing something other than stock, is that for a brief second, you can be present, you can work with another human, you can create something handcrafted, and it's fun. At least it feels organic. It feels like something different than the typical manicured BS you get on every other project.
I feel comfortable.
Now, why are we sitting here and not making movies together?
I said, let's go make a film.
This has been an hour and 24 minutes of not making a film.
Cinetherapy Podcast with Sam and Mitch, or Dad.
Welcome to the Cinetherapy Podcast by Inland Film Co. I'm Mitch Williams, hosting with Sam McGhee. Today, our guest is composer Ian McLeod, co-owner of Cloud9 Music. On this episode, we talk about how filmmakers can effectively communicate with composers, making Grammy Award-winning music in your bedroom, and a long list of directors, composers, and films that are currently inspiring us. Enjoy. Before we go any further, since we've just seen, if you're watching on YouTube, we've just seen this person's face, finally, after us blabbering. Today we have Ian McLeod. Is that how I pronounce it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Perfect.
Ian McLeod, a composer, songwriter, just all things music and film with Cloud9 Production Studios.
Anything you'd like, Cloud9 Music.
Music? Okay.
That's usually our go-to.
Beautiful. Yes, and so he has done some amazing work, most recently in the documentary Cowboys, which I was able to watch. There's probably something more recent than that, but that's most recent to me. So, Ian, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm honored.
So, should we get this thing rolling?
Oh yeah, I mean it is
kind of been rolling.
It is rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need to know. So I'm going to let you drive this ship because I think you guys have talked more than I have. We had a nice long phone call, but like I still have not watched Cowboys, and it's killing me because I'm stuck watching kid shows, and then I just realize there's this whole world of like beautiful stuff that you keep adding to my list. So you're driving the ship.
Yeah, I mean, you and Ian have had a phone call prior to this. This is the first time I've seen his beautiful face on camera. So, Ian, tell us about. I probably butchered everything about who you were introducing you. So you tell us from your mouth, what you do, who you are, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, sure. I'll give you the quick elevator pitch. So I'm a composer, and I run a music post house called Cloud9 Music, and we are essentially a team of 4. I brought on 3 of my friends who I grew up playing music with and have met along the way in my music journey to kind of form a small collective. And so I head up that collective. I compose, but we essentially tackle most of our projects as a team. And so we do custom scores for everything from feature docs to films, commercials, branded content, short docu-style stuff. And then in addition to that, we feature our own music library, which we do a lot for branded content and brands. And then we do sound design and we do mixing. So kind of a one-stop shop for all things audio. It's kind of who we are and what I do.
Right on. So you say you're a composer, so the other 3 people that you hired, are they handling kind of the other, elements of audio that you referenced, like the sound design and sound mixing, or are all of you composers and all of you handling each of these respective roles?
It's a good question. So most of us are all composers. We have one set audio engineer that does just the sound design and mixing. But I realized early on when I first started, and this is my 7th year doing this, that there are limitations to me as a creative. Like I just felt like I wasn't able to tackle every type of sound that was being thrown my way. I grew up playing music in Washington, D.C. I was a jazz pianist, and I have a classical background. So, there's a lot of genres that have stemmed from that. I used to make beats for hip hop artists in the district. So I'm very familiar with kind of jazz, fusion, and funk and hip hop. And then I moved on to cinematic scores. But there are types of music and instruments that I just can't play. And I think any composer would admit that there is somewhat of a limitation to their skill set. And for me, in the work that we were doing, and you guys know this, the digital age exploded almost 7 years ago. All this branded content started to be released and started to be ubiquitous throughout. I wanted to be able to operate on a theory of abundance. I wanted to be able to tackle everything from a documentary in the Central African Republic all the way to a Ben and Jerry's commercial or a Western like Cowboys. I didn't want to be limited. So I brought on 3 other folks that I was really close with. They all play different instruments than me. They have different skill sets than me. And I think it just rounded out the team nicely, to be able to tackle a wide range of topics and subjects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's rad. And so you're still in Washington, D.C., correct?
Still in D.C., that's right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Have you guys ever been out here before?
I have.
For a shoot? Or
no,
for family?
No, for work years ago when I was in the software world. So yeah, it's
go ahead.
What were you going to say?
I was saying, whenever I ask that question, about 90% of the time people say, I've been out there for like an elementary school trip to see all the monuments. It's like the go-to.
Yeah. I'm trying to like jog my memory on the different areas that we would have been. Like is there Old Town? Is that
Old Town?
Yeah, yep. Yeah. So spent some time there. And then I'm going to sound like an idiot. So there's an area that starts with a G.
Did you see a G?
Huh? Yeah, a G. Georgetown, yeah. Okay. I thought that's where it was, but I didn't want to sound like an idiot. So I spent some time there. Yeah, DC's cool. It's kind of a, mad city, but it's it was fun. We had a good time there. So
it's a unique scene here. I feel like it plays in a little bit to this podcast you guys have because it's not a major market for what we do. At least that's been my impression. Like we have a unique scene. National Geographic has their headquarters downtown. Plenty of nonprofits and NGOs, the Nature Conservancy, Wildlife Society, conservation.org. It's not just politics and government. There's a lot of cool niches that you can find. But when I first started, everybody told me, are you going to move to LA? Or are you going to move to New York? That was the first question. Because I guess that's where it was happening, the mecca of all entertainment. And I didn't want to leave. I felt a very close tie here. I mean, there's such great history to start. You mentioned Old Town Alexandria. And this is interesting. Old Town is home to the oldest farmers market in the country. George Washington used to travel and bring his crops there to sell on Saturday mornings, awesome. Which I find to be kind of funny that, made it look for coffee, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But, you have cool fun facts like that. And then, every Sunday afternoon at Malcolm X Park in the city, they have the oldest drum circle in the country. So people have gathered for nearly 60 years to come play random drums and collectively find a beat and rhythm that lasts for hours. So I just love the history, the culture, and of course my family's here, so I didn't want to leave. And somehow we've been able to sustain for 7 years, in a mid-market region. I'm sure you guys can relate, right?
Yeah. We've talked a lot about, I think that's one of the, not that we're limiting our guest list or audience to, small to mid-market, film production markets. But I think that's kind of if we had to say we had a target market, it's for that demographic.
Yeah. Well, and then we hopped on, you and I both hopped on Clubhouse and immediately found some close friendships in those filmmakers in the small to mid-market towns that kind of all feel, a similar calling to stay where you're at. There's a tie here. But then, you have to make friends online. And I think Clubhouse gave a lot of people a perspective that there's a lot of people just like me that are out there in a small to mid market that feel like I don't want to move to LA or New York. I live here. And also, for instance, we live in the Pacific Northwest where, a lot of the car brands like Ford and Toyota and Land Rover want to come up here and do all their ads up here because of the location. So we're just right here in this super pretty part of the world that, if you spin it right, this is actually prime. And so, I like that. And I also, am wanting to go visit DC. I've never been, I know I've heard you talk about it a little bit, but I didn't realize that that's where you were at. This is the first time I'm hearing of this.
Well, shoot. I mean, I feel like before the pandemic, we were all over the place, going to film festivals and, doing spotting sessions in Portland. I think that's kind of the fun thing about our job is the old model has changed. Just everything, all technology has just made it more accessible. Whereas before, if you were doing music, you probably had to have a brick and mortar shop, a post house that had its edit bays, all of your music studio equipment set up, different types of physical recorders and things like that. And now if you have a computer and a MIDI keyboard and a mic and a violin, you can create a score from the back of your van.
Yeah. Have you watched the Billie Eilish documentary?
I just did.
You just did?
Yeah.
I mean, that is just a phenomenal testament to, they are recording in their bedroom at home in a little tiny house in LA, and one of the most incredible albums ever, was just this brother-sister duo with a couple of mics in their room and a MIDI keyboard. And that's that's amazing. But my question, for you is what's your go-to instrument of choice, or what do you fall back on all the time? What do you start with?
I fall back on piano. I'm a pianist by trade, so it's my favorite instrument by far.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be my easy answer.
What kind of what kinds of keys related instruments do you like to play?
Keys related instruments?
Yeah, because I grew up with a buddy who I grew up with a buddy who rebuilt amps from old Hammond organs and played a Rhodes, restored old cool keyboards. And so I've been around all of them and I think they're all rad. Are you, I peg you as a grand piano kind of guy. I don't want to offend.
Why is that? Because my hair is nicely coiffed.
Yeah. No, you have a way about your speech that's clear, and I just assume grand piano.
Oh man. Well, it's funny you bring that up. I feel like you're spot on. It's my side job that I do now is on the weekends, and this is before the pandemic. I used to play gigs around the city as kind of the piano man, right? I'd go to different country clubs, or I'd play at hotels, or I'd play a lounge night at a bar, and I would just go play for a couple of hours because it got me out of my cave just making music. It was a good chance to be around people. So, yes, I'd say a grand is my instrument by choice. But my favorite artist of all time is Ray Charles. And that cat just had soul. He had grit. And if I had a key instrument that I love the most, it'd probably be a Wurlitzer, and that electric piano is something irreplaceable about that sound. But man, there's so many things I could get into specifics about with the piano. For me, you might sit there and say a grand has a great sound. Well, I love good old uprights. Like I have a Gold Branson piano. Most people don't know what a Gold Branson is, and it's from my wife. My wife's family has been in their family for years. Made in the early 1900s, so it's nearly 90 years old. It's got original ivory keys, an incredible honky-tonk sound. And, back then, I learned just through my own research that nearly anybody with wealth back then had a piano. So the piano distribution was pretty prevalent. But as the years went by, pianos just became not as popular. So most of those big piano names shrunk and went out of business. Gold Branson was based in Chicago, and they made an incredible product, but the demand wasn't there. So most of their instruments are obviously out of stock. They don't make them. They make a lot of great uprights. And now you probably know the big hitters, which Steinway, Yamaha, right, Kiwi. And they're not always made in the States. But that's a little nerdy history for any piano folks out there. I like uprights. I use a Gold Branson. It's got ivory keys, and it gets that honky-tonk sound that I really dig.
I like that.
That's rad.
That is rad. My grandma had a Yamaha upright, and I when she passed, I think my parents still held on to it, but the honky tonk sound I'm latching on to there. So do you play a lot of country music personally, or do you just like that sound?
I play more New Orleans style jazz, anything from Art Tatum to, even the Marsalis brothers. You can find so many good. I don't use honky tonk in relation to country.
Okay.
I use it more in jazz, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But it's got a treble sound, it's not as deep.
Yep.
And it's off key. So if you're into lo-fi hip hop or something more modern like that, you can get a cool sound because the keys just don't sound fully tuned.
Yeah.
A little messy,
I like that. I think that's our vibe with visuals too. I know, I think you and I both, like with the history of like guitars and drums and now cameras, I think there's an aspect of that not quite perfect sound or not quite perfect visual that intrigues us.
I think it's Jack White. He talks about like if he has a perfect guitar in front of him, he like intentionally tries to mess it up, or he, at least on maybe the way he approaches it is that he prefers an instrument that has some sort of flaw. Yeah. It makes him work harder as an artist to
I
make
like
it. Yeah. Yeah. So
the raw sound, let's go back to Billie Eilish. We'll bring it back full circle. I think it's a lesson to any future composers or musicians listening to this. You can apply it beyond music, maybe to filmmakers. And that is, you don't have to have all this fancy equipment to mix stuff and make it sound super polished. Sometimes that's the point, is to not have it be super polished. You can put out a Grammy award-winning, groundbreaking record from your bedroom. It's kind of an FU to the establishment, and it's a portal for anybody that wants to make music to succeed, in my eyes.
Totally. Gosh, there's a lot. I kind of want to stay on pianos, but then I'm like, we could talk probably all day. So there are a lot of ways this could go. I will just ask you something that's been on my mind. A question that I've wanted to ask is just one, at what state of a film being made are you normally brought in? Maybe when would you prefer that you're brought in? And then I just wanted to hear like how you approach creating a score or composing, music specifically to a film, whether it's a doc or a feature or whatever?
Got it. I love these questions. I'd say 75% of the time we are brought in near a fine cut, and not necessarily a picture cut. There's still some changes to be made. So a fine cut, and there's some semblance of temp in the score. And then usually we have a jump off call, with the director, the editor, the post supervisor, whoever's managing the project, and talk through the score, everything about it, the vibe, the instrumentation, different scenes and thematic ideas, where the temp is working, where it isn't. And then we go about replacing the temp with kind of our own ideas and chopping it away, one bite of the elephant at a time. So that's 75% of the time. And that's usually the case, in my opinion, because the post schedule is moving so quick. We only have 3-4 weeks, maybe a month and a half. Cowboys was a good example of, my own personal preference. We got in early. We worked with an incredible editor, Lucas Harder. You guys probably know.
Yeah, we're familiar with him. Yeah.
And we got to meet him early. Bud Force was the director. He was a close friend of mine. So we had been talking about the score for almost a year. And we had plenty of examples, and we really wanted to dial in a particular sound for Cowboys. So we came in about 3 or 4 months before the project even hit post. And it was like going to grad school for us. We got links to different movies, anything from, Legends of the Fall to Last of the Mohicans, classic Westerns. Bud wanted a real classic orchestral sound, and we had to dial in the right string tones for that. So for the first couple months before they even hit post, we were testing out sounds, and there was no picture to look at. We were just going off of our own edification in the Western world. So that was a lot of fun, because I feel like once we did hit post-production, Lucas was able to throw in some temp, but for the most part, all of that work we had done pre-post helped us develop the scores once we hit once we hit our schedule, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you prefer having temp in front of you, or do you sometimes see that can get in the way, or is it more helpful?
It's certainly a double-edged sword, because temp love, or demo-itis, as my friend Matt Sedeby likes to say, as part of our team, is a real thing. You guys probably know this. You put a track in there, it's working really well, the client digs it, and then you want to replace it from a composer, and the client says, well, what about that track? Why can't we use that track? Well, maybe the track costs $25,000. We can't afford that track. For whatever reason, it's easy to latch on to what you've been hearing for weeks, But at the same time, sometimes when there's no temp, you're shooting in the dark. It's a really subjective matter. Music is, what you like, what you don't like. So if you're working with a first-time director and you're really feeling them out and what their sound is like and what they, prefer, what their intuition is, it's a hard thing to channel your first time through. So temp can really help give you an idea of pacing, swells, mood, overall intent behind the scene. I prefer to work with it because of those things. But my only guidance to directors that I work with is you don't have to pick the perfect song. If you're going to fill a film with temp music, fill it from a pacing standpoint. I want to see how the film is moving with the music. If we can get an idea of how quickly something is going along, be it percussion, piano key hits, swells, that can at least lay a foundation for us to build something better. Did that make sense? Hopefully, yeah. I just threw a...
No, that totally made sense. I have 2 things going on right now in my mind. A, I want to know what my next question is for the podcast purpose, but B, when we're working on a narrative piece, now this is in my mind, I don't know how to communicate what it is that I want from music. And I think like Mitch said, our first, kind of the start of our relationship together is playing music. And so, I do like to fall back on one of our first loves, both of us, is music. And so, but I'm a drummer, by nature. And so the pacing of our edits has always been, it's always been something so personal. And so I have a deep interest in working with a composer, and also a great fear in working with a composer that, like, I also dream of composing music for our stuff, but like, that's probably never going to happen. We're going to work with composers. So I have two things going on in my mind right now, and you're bringing up a lot of aspects of the editing process I've never thought about, the filmmaking process I've never thought about.
You brought up a point to, the client getting attached to temp, and that brought me to kind of a horror story a year ago, working on a regional ad, and I recorded temp VO, and we sent it to the client, and we had already hired someone for voiceover and paid them. And when we delivered it with the voiceover that we paid for, the client said, was that your voice? I liked your voice better. And so my voice ended up on TV, and we paid somebody to, anyways.
You're a star, man. We got to start bringing.
Oh man.
Yeah. And I wasn't that impressed with my voice, but maybe it was something to do with the pacing. So
I think it had everything to do with the pacing in that case. I think that we both are now fearful of doing anything temp, showing anything temp to a client, especially in the commercial world, because if we want it a certain way, we don't want the client to hear the temp version, because that might mess up our vision for it. So we hesitate to send anything temp to a client now.
Yeah.
By the way, I did in the end for that ad, I did like your voice better.
Thank you.
Even though the cool, deep male voice that we had in mind sounded awesome, after a while, I started to realize that I did like your temp voice for that. Well,
thank you. So that makes total sense, what you were saying, now that we're circling back to what you were talking about. I'm fascinated with the idea of, as Sam said, working, with a composer, start to finish. I am maybe zealous, if that's the right word, in my current state of mind, thinking that I would just want to throw something at a composer and say, come up with something. But then on the flip side, we have cut music to all of our own edits, and as Sam said, it's very personal. So we have, I would say, the Gracie documentary is a great example of the pacing really just happened with how we felt in the moment, it made us is this going to make me cringe? Is this going to make me cry? Yeah. Is this going to make me happy? Whatever. And so it's crazy how much music can manipulate people into feeling something.
Or a lack of music. Manipulates people into feeling something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes that feels underutilized, as people rely on music to carry a scene. As I've continued to score, I've pulled back a lot. I admire John Williams as one of the greats of all time. But, I guess maybe I prefer something much more minimalistic these days. Something that can, for music, when it dominates a scene. Sometimes a great score, you don't notice it at all. You're so caught up in that moment, in that feeling.
Yeah.
That it just complements it to a very delicate but perfect balance. So sometimes when there's no music and it's just verite, that can be so powerful. And we did that a couple of times with Cowboys. You're out there in such remote, grand landscapes, hundreds of thousands of acres. And these guys are going out on pitch wagons and or chuck wagons, and they're pitching, teepees and spending the night. It's inherently quiet. Cowboys live in that silence. So there were moments when we pulled back on the score, and you could just hear, that natural sound, and it made a huge impact. Then you bring in a subtle string slur, followed by a big swell of a small orchestral ensemble, and boom, you could really hit something special.
Yeah. And I would say that documentary in specific, the score, I mean, you did a phenomenal job with, I obviously, I really like what Lucas does in terms of editing. That was a long project, wasn't it? That was a couple years.
It was.
Yeah.
Labor of love for Bud Forrest, the director.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's still going. It's now streaming on Amazon Prime, but, they still deal with distribution and all of the logistics that go into making a documentary. But, he spent 2 or 3 years filming it and at least a couple of months cutting it. And then you have all the release stuff that happens after. It almost felt like a 5-year venture for that team. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. It's a pretty doc as well. I liked it. So,
well, I appreciate the kind words. I wanted to go back to something you said about that question about whether you come in at temp or not.
Yeah.
It's nice to come in when there's no temp sometimes, because it allows the composer to flex some creative muscle. We've done that a few times, more on the commercial work side than we have for big, long features or documentaries. But I just think that if you do that, there's got to be a good open dialogue between the director and the composer. There's a responsibility on your part to be open to descriptors and try your best. You're both musicians, so it's a lot easier, but maybe a director that doesn't have any musical background to have to describe what they want. There's some vulnerability there because they don't really know the language and they don't want to sound dumb or lead a composer astray. But I think a composer has to be really detailed and diligent and internalize some maybe nuanced language. Like if a director's like, I want it to sound squishy. Well, let's define squishy. Let's find a way to make that work in the studio.
Yeah.
The descriptors always work for us. Like if we're working with you guys, we're going to pick your brain relentlessly on everything from the mood, the vibe, the instrumentation. What instruments do you like? What do you not like? Okay, how about tempo and pacing? Is there a point where things stop and cut out completely? Are we thinking about a build? We might even bring reference links to the table, show you previous work on other brands that we've liked that might sound similar to the vibe you're going for. And just really narrow down that subjective sound,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel a little bit of anxiety around the idea of describing what it is that I'm looking for. Cause I think even as a musician, I don't necessarily have a grasp on descriptive language, what I want. And I am really impressed by your ability to word. I'm impressed with your descriptive words for music. You are able to give me, like pictures, I guess, as weird as that is to talk about music in terms of pictures, but you give me a sense of what I can hear what you're talking about when you're describing a piece of music, or when you're describing like a swell and then this and then this and then this. And I think like for me, I just want constant loud drums. Like, is that's all I want all the time. Like, okay. So on the music service we use right now, there's a playlist called Experimental Sounds. And it rarely gets updated. I don't think a lot of people like to use that one. I don't think a lot of filmmakers like to use that playlist, but I love it because half the time it's just drums and weird chains. Sounds and chains. Anything that's just chains. Oh man, so there you go. There's a hint at like what I want as a filmmaker is just sounds and rhythms all the time. Right. Crescendo cymbals all the time.
Yes, I dig this. See, I feel like it comes all, Sam, I want to talk about the anxiety you talk about, maybe trying to describe it to a composer. Maybe that's why you might be reluctant to choose a composer, because at the end of the day, you have to deliver to the client on time. And if you pick a composer and you go through the music process, it could log jam, it could delay, and then it messes up your final deliverable, and then
That's true.
You're stuck having pieces, right? I just feel like it comes down to energy. And obviously you want someone with a good rap sheet. You guys have a really great portfolio. I think we have a good portfolio. So we're at a different stage than beginners. And obviously I don't consider ourselves experts either, but it comes down to energy. If you and I are chatting and talking through possibilities, you want to meet that person with like a real upbeat energy. There's no stupid idea. There's no stupid word you can throw out there that I would judge, and vice versa. So no matter how difficult it is to describe that you want, you're at least going to be excited to talk about it because, hell, we're having fun, The whole production of creating something can be really bogged down with BS. And Mitch, I think you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes the client can make a headache, or you're dealing with a lot of numbers and budgets, and it just gets convoluted, and the idea of creating gets lost. And I think that's the beauty of collaboration and working with a composer and doing something other than stock, is that for a brief second, you can be present, you can work with another human, you can create something handcrafted, and it's fun. At least it feels organic. It feels like something different than the typical manicured BS you get on every other project.
I feel comfortable.
Now, why are we sitting here and not making movies together?
I said, let's go make a film.
This has been an hour and 24 minutes of not making a film.
Has it been an hour and 24? No, 48.
Well, 48 minutes of record time, but like we've been sitting here messing. I've been messing with this board and the Zoom call.
Yeah, that is, gosh, where do we go from here? That was, I'm excited about doing that sometime with you, bringing you in on that process, having fun.
I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
For you guys, can I ask you a question? I'm actually curious.
Yeah.
If you've worked with composers in the past, and if you haven't, what are the hurdles that you encounter when you're not working with a composer? Because we're talking about work with a composer, but a lot of filmmakers, I'm sure, who will listen to this may not have the budget, or they're having a library. Like, are there frustrations?
So Mitch probably has a different perspective from a directing standpoint. From an editing standpoint, working on oftentimes quick turnaround commercial projects. As a drummer, I think I have a good sense of time and pacing, and so I oftentimes will just stay up late or get up super early and rack through catalogs on our licensing service we use, and like just I can find the pacing fast. I know what I want, and then I know how to. I'm fully aware of how to cut something together. So like, I'll license a piece of music, pull it in, and I can rearrange stuff to fit the pacing that I need, and I can hit tempos, and I can hit like. I mentioned that, I've always dreamed of composing stuff. That's not something I think I'll ever do, but like, there's something in me that's interested in that. So, I think it just adds the idea of using a composer is, at the core of what Mitch and I want to do, making our own narrative stuff. We're writing some scripts. We want to make feature-length content, whatever, or feature-length films. So realistically, I do want to grow a relationship with a composer that I'm just jacked about, and I want to work with them and let them do their thing. But with quick turnaround stuff, like I'm just going to rely on my instinct to pick a song. I don't have to, I have a monthly subscription, and I just roll with it. So I think there's just a barrier to answer your question directly, the barrier is like, it's easy right now, and I don't want to change that. But the other side of that question was I can't remember what the other side of the question was. I'm going to word it. What am I lacking without working with a composer? I think oftentimes what I want from an editing standpoint is I can't find it. I know I want something that if I could just speak it out and say, this is what I want, somebody could make it. Right. I've never engaged in that. So that's from an editor standpoint. You probably have a different perspective from directing.
Oh, equal to Sam, I would say, capable of sitting down, matching tempo and rearranging a song. We've specific behind the badge. We made a 3-minute song, 15.5 minutes,
yeah, using the lyric version and then the instrumental version. That was
so. I am the story I was going to give you. You asked if we've worked with a composer, and at first my first thought was no, and then I remember that yes, it was a little over a year ago. We finished a film, a documentary. I would say it's like more of like an experiential film, like called The Flatlands, and it was about fly fishing in Patagonia. Sam and I went in 2019, and we tapped our friend, who is a composer and also a filmmaker, to create a score for this. And he's been on the podcast. I won't shy away. It's Kevin Graham. And he's a great dude, one of our buddies and friends. We've done work for him, and he's done work for us. But we sent it to him, and that was, to what I told you earlier, my instinct is to send it blind. And we sent it blind and said, like, hey, you come up with something. And it was nowhere near what I had envisioned for the film, and where it could have probably lended him a better hand if we had sent him some sort of temp music. And at the end of the day, I don't know if any music would have satisfied us, because it was, how long's the doc? 10 minutes?
It's about 10 minutes.
We chose to go without music. And it's all nat sound. So,
wow.
Yeah.
How long was it?
About 10 minutes. It was not a full length documentary. It's documentary short.
Yeah. And I think the only, like, what I want for that that film in its final form is to have a Foley sound designer go through the whole thing. I do think that it should be, I do think that one would be phenomenal without music and just be like the film Silence.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen that movie?
No, I haven't.
Silence.
John Krasinski.
Yeah. No, Silence with, it's Adam Driver, but
Martin Scorsese
directed it. And
yes.
Liam Neeson, Adam Driver. I'm trying to think of.
I can't remember the other guy's name. The main character. It's about Jesuit priests going into Japan to find a priest that a famous priest that they heard rumors that he apostatized, and so they were going to go in and find him. And Japan at the time, I can't remember what the era is. Japan at the time is
killing Christians.
And so Martin Scorsese had been working on this screenplay for decades.
Yeah.
And he wanted to tell this religious story that was really close to him. And it is all nat sound. It's environmental. It's waves. It's there's a lot of like torture of Christians, and so it's phenomenal. You don't even notice that there's no score until you leave the theater and you realize, oh my gosh.
Yeah, there was no music.
There was no music.
And it's like a 3.5 hour film.
Yeah. Oh.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so bold. I mean, the only example I can think of that even remotely comes close to that is Honeyland. You know, the recent doc Honeyland that won. Did you guys ever see Honeyland?
Honeyland. No, I'm going to write it down.
Oh, you have to. This will change your perception of documentary film. It feels like a narrative. Of course, it's filmed over in Europe, and you know the formula of doc over there is just so different than here. You know, handheld, right up in their face. It's about a woman who lives in a remote village in Eastern Europe. A band of gypsies moves next door to her, and life unfolds from there. And it's all about greed and the environment and reaping from the earth more than you should. But there's one music cue. So obviously similar to Scorsese. But it's a bold thing to do. I mean, a 3-hour film, my gosh.
Yeah.
I got to watch it.
Yeah, it's solid. I recommend it. The other actor, gosh, I forget his name. He's one of the latest Spider-Man. He's like the
McGuire?
No, that after McGuire, he dated Emma Stone. Gosh, I forget that. Anyways,
Andrew Garfield.
Garfield, I remembered his last name, but
Andrew Garfield. He does a great job.
What was that?
Isn't that where Andrew Garfield? I remember him. It was his big breakthrough to The Social Network.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know who did that before?
Who?
Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails.
I saw that. Recently I saw that.
It's an unbelievable score.
That just sounds like a total Fincher move. That's aggressive. I didn't know that. It blows my mind. Also, it makes perfect sense.
Well, okay, so I'll blow your mind again. He, aside from John Baptiste, Trent Reznor also did the new Pixar movie Soul.
No, he did not.
I'll go watch it. You will hear similarities between the two.
I can already hear it in my head just thinking about it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The like little bass driving everything. There are so many little tiny details about the score and the animation being so dreamy and bubbly. And I even like watched, I started watching the Disney, on Disney Plus, there's Inside Pixar. It's this series of documentaries that like interviews people who work at Pixar and telling their stories of how they came up with weird ideas for films. And one of the creative directors was experimenting with wireframe sculptures. And she was pulled into a meeting on Soul trying to decide what these beings in the great before were going to look like. And she laughed and goes, I'm working on wire sculptures. They could look like that. And they said, okay, so Friday we want to see a presentation on that. And she's like, oh, I don't actually know what I'm doing. I'm just playing with this in my free time. And so she literally had this full table full of wire sculptures. And they're like, that's what they're going to look like. perfect. It's just one line all the way around. Okay, so that came full circle. I'm fascinated with Soul, and Mitch gave it 4 stars.
4.5.
I gave it 5. It's okay. We'll keep coming back to this.
It's 5, baby. I don't even think it was made for kids. I think it was secretly made for adults.
This is the second podcast in a row we're talking about Soul.
And I think the number one issue that it comes down to, that last half star was discrepancies in the choice of ending, which I will agree with, but there were too many other things that kicked it over the edge for me. Mitch and I, by the way, look at we do tend to look at kids, I put it in quotes, kids films, animation that would normally be assumed that it's for kids. I won't call them kids films. We do look at them pretty deeply. We discuss them pretty deeply as dads. I think we're willing to go there. And I think the directors who make a lot of these animated films for kids have this family history often that like drives, it's philosophical in nature from a parent standpoint. It's not like animated films for kids are not philosophical 5-star films.
Fascinating. I love that you guys dissect them. And with Pixar, they are the gold standard for layers upon layers, Yeah. They just keep making great films. I watched a great documentary on Miles Davis the other day. I found this to be fascinating. This guy made Kind of Blue. And if you're any jazz enthusiast, or even if you're not, you probably know what that album is. Kind of Blue is like the gold standard for all of jazz albums. And if you guys haven't listened, have you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious.
I don't think I have. I'm writing it down again.
Put this on with your morning coffee and tell me it does not put you in a mood, in a place. So Kind of Blue is made. Miles Davis becomes a rock star, because back then jazz was the, I think it was the cutting edge music and if you were a cool or hip cat, that's what you did. He went to Paris, London, all over Europe, touring, came back. Anyway, his career unfolds, and I learned that he never, ever kept an album of his that he ever done in his place of residence. So he never, kept it in the house. Never performed previous tracks. Everything he did was new. And everything that he did was different and improved upon. And it just was constant progression. I kind of think of Pixar in that way. If you go from A Bug's Life or whatever their first really animated success was, look at the progression. It continues to beat the one before. And for someone to do that over the course of 20 plus years is remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love me some Pixar. I want to make sure we're on with time. What's your preference in types of projects that you work on? Maybe not just like genre film, but do you like doc? Do you like narrative? Do you like commercial? I mean, you can answer that however specific you want. You go ahead.
I think we're comfortable in doc. I've had a fascination with documentaries and the impact they make. So that's where we've lived the past 7 years. I love the idea of narratives. And we've only scored a handful of narrative films that are more in the short form range, 10, 20 minutes. But I find them to be incredibly imaginative and creative. And the scoring process is different. But I'd say just from a preference, we like documentaries. And there's a lot that can be said in 3 to 5 10-minute branded pieces. Or docu-style work, You can tell a story in 3 minutes. You really can, or 5 minutes. And we live there a lot. A lot of our work is in that 3 to 5 minute space. Obviously commercial stuff keeps the lights on and it's consistent for us, and what's nice is it's behind you in a week or two, but the documentaries are our favorite because it's very collaborative. and I like the impact they make.
For sure. How do you know Jordan Howland?
We met in mountain film.
Okay.
I'll tell you right.
Yeah, cool.
Anybody listening needs to go. If you're a filmmaker. Have you? And I think I asked this to Sam. Have you guys been?
We have not, but we are the first cut of our documentary on fly fishing in Patagonia. We submitted and didn't get in, but that's a goal. I think that's a goal of mine, is to refine it and get in.
We still wouldn't have gone to mountain film because something called COVID-19.
That's true.
Kind of.
We wouldn't have gone anyways. Yeah. That's sad. No, we want to go. Obviously we've, experienced Jordan talking about mountain film and have watched, I think I've watched a couple of the films that have gone. And so I want to go so bad.
Jordan's such a great guy. And I think that's the cool thing about those festivals. I'm really looking forward to getting back to them is, people show up, and mountain film in particular, it's not exclusive or bougie. You really feel like, the directors hang out with the festival goers, and the festival goers hang out with the sponsors. You get really big brands and industries that come. Netflix has shown up, Hulu, Nat Geo, Yeti. But it's one of those places where after a screening, you might go grab a beer or a coffee, like I did, and I saw Jordan. And after he had spoke, I recognized him, and I went up there and we shared a beer together. And we haven't worked together yet.
Yeah.
But we keep each other's work, and it's just a friend in the industry that I made. So I implore anybody that's in the creative field, if you make work and it gets into a festival, hopefully you submit to festivals, go and socialize.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Were you down there? What film were you down there for?
Well, I went back in 2015.
Cool.
It was my first time going. We had a documentary there with a female skier named Sierra Quitaquit, and it blew my mind. I'm from DC. I didn't even know a world like that existed. And I made a vow. I said, I want to go back to mountain film with a film every year. And that was the goal. And that's what we did. So for the past 5 years, we've gone back with a slew of different films. One was called How to Run 100 Miles with Brendan Leonard.
Yeah, we watched that.
I've seen that.
There was another piece called Welcome to Gwich'yaze with the great director Greg Balkin about the Gwich'in people up in the Alaskan, I think it's the Arctic National Refuge. And Follow Through with skier Caroline Gleich, and that was another REI film, and a couple more. So I felt very lucky to be paired with some really solid films.
Wow.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome.
I like that drive of a goal every year.
Yeah.
Your goal is to have a film there and to go. Every year. I think that's a really rad drive.
I appreciate it. Thank you. It certainly was all consuming.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I like the coffee there, so I couldn't miss out on that.
What is it with us bringing on everybody loves coffee? I don't get this.
It's part of our thing. We like bean soup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ugh. Sorry.
Mitch, you don't drink?
No, sorry. I just don't like it. I like the smell. I love the smell of coffee. It doesn't matter what I try. I'm like, there's better stuff out there.
Have you put creamer in yours to sweeten it up a little bit?
If you put scotch in it, maybe I will enjoy it more.
He's landed. You've had a cappuccino that you didn't think was terrible, but there's better stuff. I like that. I like the way you said that. That makes sense.
Cappuccino would be if I'm going to order something, or in the past, if I would order something, it would be a cappuccino. I like to be as pretentious as possible if I'm going to order something that I don't like. So, hey,
it's a mood, like for me, I'm a jazz musician. At least I like to think of myself as one. So I need a cup of black coffee and a cigarette. No, nice. I don't actually.
But you need it. But you need it.
what you need.
That's the vibe. By the way, you said something earlier that I wanted to correct you on. And you said about we're not beginners, but you don't want to call yourself experts. We're the experts, though. You are the expert to your client. And like, that's what I was going to, we talk about this a lot with like our relationship with clients, is that at the end of the day, if we hired you, you're the expert. Like if Sam and Mitch Inland hired Ian McLeod, Cloud9 Music, you're the expert. And I just want to make clear that you need to wear that expert hat when you're talking to us dummies, because
we should get hats with that printed. The expert hat.
Yes.
Expert.
Yes. That's all I was going to say. It was just kind of a little side note that was sticking in my ear. And I basically wanted to say, like, everything you've said today, I'm like, well, this guy's the expert.
Yeah.
And he may not see himself as, Hans Zimmer, but, you're...
Oh my gosh, that's actually a question. Okay, so I want to ask this question: what composers? Because I know we brought it up with Kevin Graham. He said it's ironic, but Hans Zimmer's my favorite. What composers inspire you, or what composers do you like to reference? And then I'll ask the same question about filmmakers. But what composers do you like?
Oh man. Well, there's a big difference between who I like and who we get referenced all the time. You know, like people say, we've worked with agencies before that have put a Hans Zimmer track in there. And it's like, go make a Hans Zimmer track. And that's extremely daunting. But, I think Hans has a sound that we can channel. It's a good inspiration. I told you I like raw sounds, sometimes things that aren't fully polished. Maybe a score that I love, and I don't even know the composer's name off the top of my head, but Beasts of a Southern Wild. Did you guys ever see that film?
Dude, you are just it's throwing stuff out.
So familiar. Okay, keep going.
Wonderful film based in New Orleans about the people that live down in the bayou areas and where a lot of the beyond the levees. So, they live and breathe around the waters of New Orleans. And go watch this film. It's incredible. It's so raw. The score is so perfect for it. I think I heard elements of guitar and banjo and all types of stringed and plucked instruments with great violins and slurs. So that was a beautiful film score, and it's probably one of my favorites of all time. But a composer I've seen that's kind of skyrocketed, and I know he's doing really well in LA. He probably has no idea who I am. Tyler Strickland. He did a great film called Wildland, which is another wonderful doc. It won a couple of Emmys. These two filmmakers named Alex Jablonski and Khalil Hudson did Wildland, and that was the wonderful score. Delicate strings, kind of a simplistic, organic soundscape. You can kind of see where I'm getting at. I like things that are a little more pulled back and raw.
Yeah. So what? So do you mostly watch documentaries?
No, I don't. I have my guilty pleasure shows that I watch with my wife, Vanderpump Rules. But I can't believe I just admitted to that. I'm
in my personal life. I don't think I don't want to have any guilty pleasures. I think that I watch what I watch, and I'll talk about it. I think I'm not guilty about it. I listen to what I listen to. I'm not guilty about it. What do you like to watch? What I know I asked about I asked the question, do you mostly watch documentaries, because you've given a long list of stuff that I either have watched and love or like need to watch, and so that's inspiring. But so I asked the question directly. I could have asked it open-ended. What do you like to watch, and what directors are inspiring you?
No, it's a great question. So I watch probably more miniseries than I watch anything else. That seems to be the trend, right, on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon. When we were doing Cowboys, I remember we got reference to Yellowstone and kind of a dramatization of the Western world and what it means to run a big ranch. So I've watched that with my wife. So I've got some particular taste. I thought Godless was an incredible series on Netflix. If you guys haven't seen that, kind of a real life story, and it had Western elements to it that was really tastefully done. There's a new series that came out. You know, I'm a jazz guy, so The Eddie, which was made by, I think, the La La Land creator, and that's all about a jazz club based in Paris. So it's really mini series that I watched. The thing about documentaries, and I've seen some of the popular ones, you know, The Social Dilemma, My Octopus Teacher, you know, some of those that have won awards, is that you have to focus and consume the information. And there are times when I'm so checked out after a long day, I just want to veg out and watch something, be it sports or something mindless and numbing like a reality TV with my wife. So I would say it just is a blend. When I'm in the mood, it's a good documentary. And I love a good film. You know, I want to go back to favorite composers. Johnny Greenwood has got to be up there for me. And There Will Be Blood is, in my mind, one of the best films I've ever seen in my life. Do you guys know that film?
Are you on Letterboxd?
No.
There's an app. You need to go on Letterboxd. It's for documenting films that you've watched and
adding to a watch list.
Adding things to a watch list. That's what I've been doing, by the way. Every time you mention something, I look it up and I send it to Mitch immediately. But for Mitch and I, There Will Be Blood is when you look up a person, a user, like it's a kind of a social network, but not really. Mitch and I both have There Will Be Blood in our top 4.
But it's my favorite film.
Yeah.
I like to say, and I almost think Kanye West said it as well, but There Will Be Blood is cinema. Like it's.
Oh my God! I got hair. The hair on my back is raised right now when you said that.
Yeah, and I think everyone I've shown it to leaves feeling something, and yeah, it does its job. Like I watched it with my father-in-law. My wife was sitting there and she like couldn't take her eyes off the screen, and she was like, I hate this, but she like kept watching, and she finally ended up going to bed. But like, I'm like, this, it's working. Like the movie is doing what it's supposed to do.
Right.
You know, and so, yeah, it's so good.
God, I'm so glad you guys love that film. I mean, the Daniel Plainview character, the scenes in the church, the end when you got, the milkshake. There's just so many iconic moments, like you said, that you look at this act. I mean, it's just like you're transported there in the room. And the music is a perfect example of like, melodically, there's not a whole lot going on. Like if you watch that scene where the oil begins to spill and the night fire starts and it's kind of like this percussive, chugging, you almost don't even recognize it happening.
Yeah.
You know? It's a perfect compliment.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And they're Paul Thomas Anderson has Sam's studied a decent number of things in that film that when they're in the town and they put it on rails.
Like a very Wes Anderson type shot of following the car as he's driving through the town and then comes into park.
Yeah. And at first they did not put it. No,
they set up a full dolly.
Yeah, they set up a full dolly
because they were going to dolly and follow the car, and it just did not. It felt too perfect, and they literally set up the dolly track next to a railroad, and so they just scrapped the dolly tracks and put the dolly on the railroad. And so as they're tracking with the car, as they're following the car, it's rolling, it's bumping like a railroad car would. And
wow.
It was like
and when PTA showed up, they asked him, do you want the dolly? And they're like, no. And he's like, no, I want it just like this. And they're like, like they had already set it up and tore it down.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I mean, there's just some, and the opening scene is like 18 minutes of just one shot, like
18 minutes of stress and anxiety,
or however long it is. It's just insane. But yeah, it's wild.
That's a good, okay. So there's a good benchmark for when we work together. I think everything about the score of that film is what I want for everything. Even if it's like a super,
that film to be our film to be
a
as good
super upbeat commercial spot that's like bright and it's a med spa kind of a product. I just want that score.
You want that score?
Yeah.
I like it. That's so, it's like, I want to say anti-establishment, but it's just, let's just throw the consumer for a full whirlwind. Upbeat, happy family vibes, and then like a dark Johnny Greenwood, There Will Be Blood score.
We're like legit wanting to pitch a like aesthetic, like medical laser commercial, like to be shot like a horror film.
Have you watched, do you ever follow Ryan Booth?
Yes.
Have you seen his Welch's grapes ads?
No, but okay, tell me about this. I'm a huge Ryan Booth fan.
He pitched to Welch's this concept of ads that were like horror films, like squeezing the nutrients, squeezing the antioxidants out of the grapes. You tell the grapes to give you the antioxidants. And when you squeeze grapes, it looks like blood. And so he like went into, you tell this story so much better because you have listened to it.
Well, they churn the grapes to like make the grape juice in these machines, and they're filming everything on location at the Welch's facility. And so they're having to work with whatever environment they're given. And they're like, have you ever opened those doors on this? And it's like kind of like a hallway. And they're like, no. And he's like, well, could you? And they're like, yeah, but like grape juice would fly everywhere. And he goes, can I see it? And they like open these doors of these big like vats and turn the machines on, and like grape juice is just spraying everywhere. Yes. And this big like dude in overalls is just getting splattered.
He's got his like his safety ears on and his safety glasses on, and he's just standing there in this like dark shot. And grapes and grape juice are just flying everywhere. Oh,
yeah. I'll send you some of the ads. They're hard to find on online anymore, but you can find them.
You got to send these to me. And you guys have to watch Honeyland tonight. Like, we've been talking about so many great things. Concepts that will blow your mind. Okay, this Welch's grape. That blows my mind. Honeyland, that will blow your mind.
Okay. I will watch Honeyland after I watch The Writer.
Yeah, The Writer.
Every single time I tell Mitch, oh, you know what I watched last night? And if I don't say The Writer, I can see his eyes are just furious.
I'm upset because I just want to talk about it. Have you watched The Writer?
No, I need to. Tell me about The Writer. Is it a film or?
Chloe Zhao's winning all these awards for Nomadland.
Mm-hmm.
And the last movie she did prior to Nomadland was called The Rider. It's phenomenal. She's becoming famous for shooting narrative doc. Like, she's using real people to shoot a narrative film, not professional actors. And she's going into like their environment and almost creating a story around like the life that these people are living. And in Nomadland, Frances McDormand's a real actress, but everybody else are all these like crazy people that they found. So
damn, I gotta watch So the rider is the film before.
Yes, yes, and I am most recently anxious about people watching the rider because I don't think Nomadland is as good. So I'll keep it that simple. In an interview, Chloe Zhao the other night, I saw say that this is something I didn't know, that they filmed the rider with a 5-person crew, and that just blew my mind. So,
wow.
Yeah. So,
okay, I'm writing that down. By the way, guys, I am getting
summoned.
I'm getting mean texts from my wife that I am due for being on puppy duty. It's I've been out of commission. We have a 10-week-old puppy, and she's in grad school and work, and she is. It's your turn to jump in, and I'm like, okay. So I feel like I could talk to you guys all freaking night about this stuff, but I know that she's happy wife, happy life.
It's all right. I got it. We were nearing the end of our availability as well, so it works out perfect. So, thank you for jumping on today, Ian.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out for a little bit.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again because I have plenty of questions that I'd like to ask you.
Yep. So. And I'm sure we're going to go talk, and then we'll have more questions, and then
and
we're going to go make a film.
We'll set up another one where you can just interview us the whole time. And so, yeah.
Wait, before we go, I have to ask you guys one last question.
All right.
Okay.
Your favorite film scores. You guys asked me, who my composers were, and I mentioned a few, but give me some juice.
I don't know. I would say I'm a huge, this is like just off the cuff. I would have to say this is Hans Zimmer, but Interstellar is just incredible for me. Like, it's one that I can, like, if I just hear, I get the chills, and I'm put into like a different dimension that exists in outer space, but not like, anyways, I don't know. That's just an incredible one. And then, you go.
I always come back to The Dark Knight Rises. And I think it's the deep, dark drums that like drive scenes. And I know, like, I also have like a contrast in like the Joker recently. Was that driven by cello a lot? Like all these really delicate scenes where he's dancing. But I think The Dark Knight Rises is one that just hits me every single time. I'm all about, I'm just all about crazy drums. I like simplicity, and I like when a beat drives something, but I don't ever want that to be the main focus, because I think that I tend to get stuck there, and I don't think of things outside that box. So, I want to mention that, but I don't want that to be the only thing. Because you also mentioned, soul, and I think that there is something about the music in soul that hits me, but it's all these little sounds that come, they make a beat. So,
right, those arpeggiated synths.
Yep.
Did you ever see Birdman?
Yes.
That's another that also is just drums. I mean,
oh my God, the drum, mind melt.
Whiplash.
Yeah. I mean, Whiplash was definitely a stressful film for me, because I did play jazz band in high school, and that was it. We were pretty prestigious high school jazz band, and that was a hard one.
Sound of Metal. Did you see that one yet?
It is on my list. Is that intense?
Watch The Rider and watch Sound of Metal. It's as a double feature. The Rider is about a cowboy, or like a rodeo cowboy that can no longer be a rodeo cowboy. And Sound of Metal is about a drummer who can no longer be a drummer. So, they pair well together. I was going to say my other one really quick before we let you go. And I'm glad I looked him up because he deserves the credit. Rest in peace. The Arrival, Johan Johansson or however you pronounce his name. Yeah. Speaking of piano. Yeah.
Yeah, that film. I mean, the piano is just beautiful.
Yeah. So I at least like lend a hand that I obviously like some sci-fi, but I like those movies more based on the emotional aspect, like the family element in both of those films. Those are what, they just wreck
great
me.
calls. Well, let's watch The Rider, and then I'll follow that up with Sound of Metal.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. And then we will watch Honeyland. Okay.
And then podcast number 2.
Yeah.
Podcast number 2, where we'll talk about all that. Right
Awesome.
on. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Go enjoy your puppy.
Yep. Enjoy your puppy and tell your wife we're sorry and thank you. Thank you for listening to the Cinetherapy Podcast, hosted by Inland Film Co., produced by Ira Dern. That's a wrap.